There's a reason your life feels strange lately. Not bad, not broken, just unfamiliar. The things that used to excite you don't hit the same anymore. The conversations you used to enjoy feel draining. Even your routines feel like they belong to somebody else. And what's scary is, you can't explain why. But before you click away, listen carefully. Because what you're feeling right now is not confusion. It's separation. A part of you is losing control, and another part of you is trying to take its place. Most people never stay long enough to experience this shift. The moment their inner world starts changing, they panic. They distract themselves. They go back to old habits, old relationships, old identities, because familiarity feels safer than growth. But you didn't leave. You stayed. And that tells me something important about you. Deep down, you already know your current life can't carry the future version of you. That realization changes everything. Here's what nobody tells you about personal transformation. It does not begin with confidence. It begins with discomfort. At first, it feels like losing motivation. Then it feels like emotional exhaustion. Then suddenly, you start questioning everything. Your goals, your friendships, your habits, even the role you've been playing in your own life. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake this moment for failure. But this is not failure. This is your mind realizing it can no longer pretend. Because the version of you that survived your past was built for survival, not peace. That version learned how to avoid rejection, avoid disappointment, avoid pain. But survival patterns don't disappear automatically when the danger is gone. They stay. And eventually, they start controlling your entire life. Pay attention to this part because most people miss it. You are not reacting to life as it is. You are reacting to life through conditioning. You stopped questioning years ago. That's why the same emotional cycles keep repeating. Different people, different situations, same outcome. Because the external details change, but the internal pattern stays untouched. And the longer you live inside that pattern, the more normal it feels. Until one day, something inside you finally says, I can't keep doing this. That moment is powerful, because that's the exact point where your identity begins to crack. And when identity cracks, people usually do one of two things. They evolve, or they run back to what's familiar. Watch this carefully in your own life. The moment you start changing, you'll suddenly feel the urge to return to old behaviors. Not because they're good for you, because they're predictable. Your nervous system would rather experience familiar stress than unfamiliar freedom. Read that again mentally. Familiar stress feels safer to the brain than unfamiliar peace. That's why people sabotage new beginnings. That's why people go back to environments they already outgrew. That's why people shrink the second their life starts expanding. And maybe you've done this too. Maybe every time your life tried to move forward, another part of you quietly pulled the brakes. Not because you're weak, because your identity was still attached to an older version of yourself. But something is changing now. You can feel it. You're becoming less interested in performing, less interested in forcing connections, less interested in proving yourself to people who already misunderstood you. And that shift matters more than you realize, because healing is not becoming more impressive. It's becoming more honest. And honesty changes everything. The honest version of you knows. You've outgrown certain mindsets, certain environments, certain versions of yourself. But letting go is difficult, not because the old version was beautiful, because it was familiar. You spent years becoming that person, years learning how to think that way, respond that way, protect yourself that way. So when those patterns start collapsing, it feels personal. It feels like you're losing yourself, but you're not losing yourself. You're losing what no longer reflects you. Huge difference. And this next part might hit hard. Sometimes your exhaustion has nothing to do with work. Sometimes you're tired because your mind is carrying an identity that no longer fits, like wearing emotional clothing 3 sizes too small. Every conversation becomes draining. Every decision feels heavy. Every day feels forced. Because deep down, you already know you're supposed to move differently now. That's why this season feels uncomfortable. Because internally, something is rearranging itself inside you long before your external life reflects it. And that delay can mess with your mind. Because part of you expects visible proof that you're changing. You expect instant clarity, instant confidence, instant direction. But real transformation rarely looks clean in the beginning. Most of the time, it looks like uncertainty. It looks like outgrowing conversations you used to enjoy. It looks like feeling emotionally disconnected from environments that once felt normal. It looks like suddenly realizing that the version of you who used to tolerate certain things no longer can. And that realization creates tension, because your outer life still carries traces of your old identity, while your inner world is quietly trying to move beyond it. That's why this phase feels strange. You're transitioning internally before your external life catches up. And transitions are messy. Nobody talks enough about that part. People love talking about breakthroughs. They love talking about success stories after everything finally works out. They love posting the transformation after the healing is finished. But very few people talk about the middle phase. The phase where nothing feels stable. The phase where your old mindset is fading, but your new mindset hasn't fully formed yet. That space can feel lonely. Not because nobody is around you, but because internally you no longer feel connected to the life you used to emotionally belong to. You start feeling disconnected from people, disconnected from routines, disconnected from certain goals, disconnected from the personality you spent years building. And honestly, that can feel terrifying, because humans naturally crave certainty. Even painful certainty can feel safer than unfamiliar growth. So when your identity starts changing, your mind immediately tries to pull you back toward what feels predictable. That's why during periods of growth, you suddenly feel tempted to revisit old habits, old relationships, old coping mechanisms, old versions of yourself, not because you truly want them back, but because your nervous system associates familiarity with safety. And if you don't understand what's happening, you'll think you're falling apart. You'll think you're becoming lazy, lost, confused, emotionally unstable, but you're not. You're recalibrating. There's a difference. A machine recalibrates when the old settings no longer match the direction it's trying to move toward. And that's exactly what's happening inside you. Your mind is trying to update itself. Your emotional patterns are trying to reorganize. Your identity is trying to detach from versions of you that were built from fear, survival, insecurity, or emotional exhaustion. And that process is uncomfortable because growth challenges familiarity. But pay attention to this carefully. Discomfort does not always mean something is wrong. Sometimes discomfort is the evidence that something outdated is finally losing control over you. And here's the shift that changes everything. Stop asking, how do I become a different person? That question keeps your focus on performance. Instead ask, what am I still carrying that no longer belongs in the life I'm trying to create? Because growth is less about adding and more about releasing. Releasing reactions that no longer reflect your maturity. Releasing emotional habits that keep recreating the same pain. Releasing the constant need to prove your worth. Releasing the role you learned to play just to feel accepted. Releasing the pressure to remain who you were simply because other people got comfortable with that version of you. That last part matters more than you think. Because yes, people will notice the change. Some people will celebrate it. They'll recognize your peace, your confidence, your emotional honesty. But others will become uncomfortable, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your growth disrupts the version of you they became familiar with. People often build expectations around your old identity, the quiet version of you, the people-pleasing version of you, the insecure version of you, the version that tolerated disrespect, the version that constantly explained themselves, the version that stayed small to avoid making others uncomfortable. And the moment you stop performing those patterns, the relationship changes, because now they have to interact with the real you, not the version of you that existed for their comfort. That's why growth can feel isolating sometimes. Not everyone is connected to your authenticity. Some people are connected to your predictability. And once you stop abandoning yourself just to maintain that predictability, everything shifts. Some relationships deepen, others quietly fade. And painful as that may feel, it's often necessary, because your future cannot fully open while your identity is still chained to environments that only recognize your past. But don't miss this part. You do not need everyone to understand your transformation. You only need the courage to continue it, because eventually something beautiful starts happening. You stop craving constant validation. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop needing approval to trust your own instincts. You stop measuring your worth through how useful you are to other people. And for the first time in a long time, you begin feeling emotionally free. That's when your life truly starts changing. Not when you become perfect. Not when everything externally looks impressive. When you become aligned. When your internal world finally stops fighting against itself. When your choices stop coming from fear. when your actions stop being controlled by insecurity, when your identity stops depending on who accepts you, praises you, or stays. That's freedom. Real freedom. The kind most people spend their entire lives searching for, without realizing it begins internally first. And if this message is reaching you at the exact moment you needed it, I want you to pause for a second and really think about your life. Think about the patterns you've outgrown. Think about the emotional weight you've been carrying. Think about the version of yourself you keep returning to, even though deep down you know you've already outgrown them. Then go to the comments and type, "I refuse to go backwards." Those 5 words matter, because transformation begins the moment you stop negotiating with a life that no longer fits you. The moment you stop romanticizing old versions of yourself that were built from pain. The moment you stop shrinking just to maintain familiarity. The moment you stop betraying your growth to keep other people comfortable. That decision changes everything. And if someone you love is currently stuck between who they used to be and who they're trying to become, share this with them. Because some people aren't looking for advice. They're looking for confirmation that what they're feeling is real. Listen carefully now. You are not behind in life. You are not broken. And you are not losing yourself. You are shedding emotional weight you were never meant to carry forever. That's why your inner world feels different lately. You're becoming aware of things you once ignored, patterns you once normalized, pain you once accepted as permanent. And awareness changes people. Once you truly see a pattern, you cannot fully return to unconsciousness. That's why your old life feels harder to tolerate now. Not because life suddenly became worse, but because your awareness became deeper. And from this moment forward, you have a choice. You can return to what feels familiar, even if it keeps you emotionally trapped. Or you can continue becoming the person your soul has been trying to grow into this entire time. One path keeps you comfortable, the other transforms your entire life. Choose carefully, because the version of you waiting on the other side of this transition is depending on the decision you make next.